Reality screamed. Not with sound, but with a violation so fundamental that every being with even the slightest psychic sensitivity collapsed where they stood. In the sanctum sanctorum, Dr. Stephen Strange's hands spasmed, sending priceless artifacts crashing to the floor as blood poured from his nose. The eye of Agamotto burned against his chest, flaring with desperate warning. "Wang," he choked out, his astral form being pulled in directions that shouldn't exist. Something impossible is breaking through. Across the city in Avengers Tower, Wanda Maximoff's scream shattered every window on the residential floor. Vision moved to catch her as she fell, but he too staggered, the Mind Stone in his forehead suddenly resonating with a frequency that threatened to tear his synthetic consciousness apart. "Wanda, what do you see?" His voice cracked with static interference. Her eyes had turned pure scarlet, tears of blood streaming down her face. "A throne of gold, built on mountains of bones. 10,000 years of war. Oh God, he's here." In Asgard's throne room, Thor Odinson felt the hammer blow to his divine senses. The pillars trembled. The very foundations of the realm eternal groaned under pressure that shouldn't exist. He gripped Mjolnir, lightning crackling involuntarily around him. "What power dares shake the halls of Asgard itself?" he whispered. The sky above New York didn't darken, it tore. Citizens stopped mid-stride, their eyes drawn upward against their will. It wasn't a portal like the Chitauri invasion. It wasn't the purple-black of dark elf magic. This was something older, something that made the lizard part of human brain scream in primal terror. Golden lightning crackled upward from the earth, as if the planet itself was rejecting what was coming through. Every electronic device in Manhattan died simultaneously. Cars stalled on the bridges. The subway system went dark. Phones became useless bricks. In the sudden silence, people heard something impossible, their own thoughts, magnified 1,000-fold, echoing back at them with crushing psychic pressure. Hundreds collapsed unconscious in the first 30 seconds. Those who remained standing wished they hadn't because, through the wound in reality, stepped a figure that their minds struggled to comprehend. Was massive, easily 9 feet tall, clad in golden armor that seemed to generate its own light. But it wasn't the size that broke their minds. It was the presence, the sheer psychic weight of a consciousness that had guided humanity for 10 millennia, that had battled entities that predated the universe itself, that contained the accumulated will of thousands of ancient shamans merged into a single, terrible purpose. Where his armored boots touched the grass of Central Park, reality crystallized. Blades of grass turned to golden glass. The earth itself seemed to kneel before him. The emperor of mankind had arrived, and the universe would never be the same. His eyes, ancient beyond measure, burning with the gold of dying suns, swept across the unfamiliar cityscape. This wasn't Holy Terra, this wasn't the Imperium. This was something else. A divergent timeline, a parallel reality where humanity had never known the unification wars, where they remained fractured, weak, vulnerable, unacceptable. His psychic sense expanded outward like a tidal wave, touching every mind within a 100-mile radius. The unprepared simply shut down, their brains unable to process contact with a consciousness that vast. The stronger ones received visions, flashes of a galaxy-spanning empire, of humanity united under one indomitable will, of the terrible price paid for survival against the darkness between stars. And they received his purpose, crystal clear and absolutely certain. Humanity must be saved, even from itself. High above the city, the helicarrier's engine sputtered and died. "Sir, we're losing altitude," Agent Hill shouted over the blaring alarms. Nick Fury gripped the command console, his one eye fixed on the tactical display where a single point of impossible golden light burned in Central Park. Around it, a perfect circle of darkness, every camera, every sensor, every electronic device simply dead. "Get me everything we have on this," Fury barked. "And someone find me Tony Stark. Now." In Stark Tower, Tony was already suiting up. Friday's voice, usually smooth and confident, wavered with something that sounded almost like fear. "Boss, the energy readings are... I don't have a classification for this. It's not gamma, not cosmic, not even close to anything in my database. The quantum fluctuations suggest the target has somehow imposed his own physical laws on local reality." English, Friday. "He's rewriting physics just by existing, sir. And the psychic emissions, if they're accurate, exceed the combined brainwave output of every human on Earth by several orders of magnitude." Tony's face hardened behind his faceplate. Looks like we've got another God complex case. Let's go introduce ourselves. But as the Mark 51 armor carried him toward Central Park, Tony Stark made a crucial error. He assumed this was just another Loki, another Ultron, another wannabe conqueror who could be defeated with wit, tech, and a well-placed repulsor blast. He had no idea he was flying toward something that had personally strangled an orc war boss the size of a building, that had dueled the Void Dragon itself, that had orchestrated the deaths of millions. In the name of humanity's survival, he had no idea that the Emperor had already calculated 12,000 different ways to neutralize him. The Emperor stood in his perfectly circular clearing, grass withered to ash, the air itself seeming to bend around him, and watched the approaching armored figure with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations. Impressive, he thought, analyzing the suit's technology with a glance, primitive by the standards of the dark age of technology, but remarkable for a society at this developmental stage. This one has potential. Iron Man descended, hovering 20 feet away, repulsors humming with ready power. His external speakers crackled to life. This is restricted airspace. Identify yourself and state your intentions before things get complicated. The Emperor's response resonated, not just through the air, but through Tony's mind directly, a multi-layered voice that seemed to speak in every language simultaneously. I am the Emperor of mankind. I have come to unite humanity under my banner, to elevate your species beyond its current limitations, to prepare you for the horrors that await in the dark between stars. Inside his helmet, Tony's HUD flickered wildly. Friday, you getting interference? Severe quantum disruption, boss. Something is actively counteracting our computational processes. I'm losing system cohesion. Great. Hey, your goldenness, look. Your name is Anthony Stark. Your mind burns bright with genius, yet you squander it on toys and ego. Tony froze. The Emperor hadn't moved, hadn't accessed any network, yet he knew. You have potential. Potential to forge technologies that would shame the ancients. But first you must understand discipline, purpose, sacrifice. Look, I don't know where you get off. The Emperor raised one hand. That was all it took. Tony found himself frozen in midair, completely immobile. Not just the armor. His very thoughts seemed to slow, struggling against an impossible psychic pressure. The Mark 51, capable of lifting 150 tons, couldn't move an inch. How? His genius mind screamed. This isn't physically possible. There's no force field, no energy beam. He's just willing me to stop. The Emperor approached with measured steps, each footfall causing reality to ripple. Your technology is admirably sophisticated for your developmental stage, he said, his voice almost gentle. But ultimately, all technology is merely an extension of will. And your will, impressive as it is, cannot match mine. With a gesture, the armor opened, not through any command Tony gave, but because the Emperor simply decided it should. Tony stumbled out, standing exposed before a being that towered over him. Jesus Christ, Tony breathed, looking up at eyes that had seen the birth of the Imperium. What are you? I am humanity's guardian. Its protector, its guide through the darkness. In my reality, I have shepherded mankind for 10,000 years, defending them from horrors your mind cannot conceive. Your reality? Tony's tactical mind seized on that. You're from another dimension? Another universe entirely. One where humanity learned survival's price. Where we united or faced extinction. The Emperor's expression grew distant. Where the price of that unity was steep. Behind them, the roar of a Quinjet announced new arrivals. Captain America hit the ground running, shield raised, Black Widow and Hawkeye flanking him with weapons drawn. Despite their readiness, Steve Rogers couldn't shake the feeling crawling up his spine, a feeling he'd only experienced twice before. Facing the Red Skull and during Thanos' first invasion, this was different, worse. Because whatever this golden giant was, he didn't feel evil. He felt inevitable. Sir, I need you to stand down, Steve called out, his voice steady despite the pressure building behind his temples. We don't want violence, but we will defend our people. The Emperor turned, his gaze falling on Steve's shield. Vibranium, a rare element in this reality. Fascinating. Then his eyes met Steve's and the captain felt his very soul being weighed. You've been enhanced. Crude super soldier serum, but effective. Your spirit burns with conviction. Admirable. That's not an answer, Steve replied, shield steady. You ask if I will stand down. I ask, will humanity stand when the true threats arrive? Will your divided nations, your squabbling heroes, your fractured species survive what comes? Thunder cracked across the sky. A rainbow beam of light slammed into the ground and Thor emerged, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained lightning. This being's power. Thor's usual confidence was replaced with wary respect. It rivals Father at the height of the Odin force. Perhaps exceeds it. The Emperor's attention shifted to the Asgardian, his eyes narrowing. You claim godhood. You demand worship. You interfere in human affairs. His voice took on an edge of contempt. In my reality, we recognize such entities for what they truly are. Parasites feeding on humanity's devotion. Thor's grip tightened on Mjolnir. I claim no worship from Midgard's people. I stand as their ally, not their master. Noble words. But words mean nothing when... A circular portal of orange sparks materialized, interrupting him. Dr. Strange stepped through, the cloak of levitation billowing dramatically, his hands already weaving defensive sigils. This ends now, Strange declared, his voice resonating with the authority of the Sorcerer Supreme. You've breached dimensional barriers that exist for good reason. Your presence destabilizes the fabric of our reality. The Emperor studied Strange with genuine interest. You wield energies similar to the Imperium, the warp as we call it, dangerous forces that corrupt lesser minds, yet you appear untainted. Fascinating. Whatever you call it, I am its master here. Strange's hands moved through complex patterns, and I cannot allow you to remain. Without warning, Strange unleashed a banishment spell, golden sigils spiraling toward the Emperor and patterns designed to force extra-dimensional entities back to their origin point. The assembled heroes watched, hope rising. The spell struck the Emperor and simply dissolved. Like mist before fire, the carefully constructed magic unraveled into nothing. Impressive technique, the Emperor observed, not unkindly, but ultimately futile. I do not merely exist within reality, I impose my will upon it. He extended his consciousness toward Strange. The sorcerer gasped, blood trickling from his ears as the eye of Agamotto flared desperately, trying to shield its wearer from the psychic assault. Even with the Time Stone's protection, Strange fell to one knee. Your artifact contains fundamental cosmic forces, the Emperor noted, fascinated. Powerful, but you lack the understanding to use it fully. Captain America threw his shield with perfect precision, aimed at the Emperor's head. It stopped in midair, inches from its target, hung there, vibrating, then dropped harmlessly to the ground. Enough. The single word carried such weight that reality itself seemed to shudder. With a thought, the Emperor released a controlled wave of psychic energy. Every hero froze in place, held by invisible bonds that even Thor's godly strength couldn't break. Only Strange maintained a flicker of movement, the Time Stone glowing defiantly. The Emperor surveyed the assembled defenders of Earth. Powerful beings. Yes, but children playing at war compared to the battles he'd fought. You will listen, he commanded, his voice resonating in their minds as much as their ears. Your world stands at a precipice. Divided, you will fall to the threats approaching from beyond the stars. United under my guidance, humanity will not merely survive. It will conquer the galaxy itself. The choice is simple, he continued. Submit to my rule and I will elevate your species beyond your wildest imaginings. Resist and I will watch you fall to horrors you cannot comprehend. A new voice cut through the tension. Hey guys, I was in the neighborhood and holy crap. Spider-Man swung into view, landing atop a statue. His spider sense had been screaming for the last 10 minutes, but curiosity had overcome caution. That's a really big guy in gold. Is he related to you, Thor? The Emperor's attention shifted to the young hero, and Peter Parker felt a presence touch his mind. Gentle, almost curious. You possess gifts beyond normal humanity, yet you use them to protect the very people who would fear you if they knew your true nature. Why? Peter stammered, caught off guard by the direct question and the feeling of his mask being psychically penetrated. Because with great power comes great responsibility. That's what my Uncle Ben taught me before he trailed off, realizing he might be revealing too much. The Emperor considered this. Your uncle was partially correct. But responsibility extends beyond mere protection. It requires vision, direction, the strength to make difficult choices for the greater good. More heroes arrived. Scarlet Witch descended from the sky, her hands wreathed in chaos magic. Vision phased through the ground, the Mind Stone pulsing with power. The Emperor sensed the Infinity Stone immediately. Another artifact of fundamental cosmic forces, embedded in an artificial being. You play at creation without understanding the forces you manipulate. Vision met his gaze steadily. I was created, yes, but I have evolved beyond my programming. I protect all life, not merely human life. A noble sentiment, and a naive one. In the cosmos, species that do not prioritize their own survival face extinction. Wanda stepped forward, crimson energy crackling between her fingers. You talk about humanity like you own it. We've faced tyrants before. They're all gone. We're still here. The Emperor turned to her, and Wanda flinched as she felt his mind touch hers. Not violently, but with a depth and power that made her chaos magic feel like a candle compared to the sun. Your power stems from the same energies as the stone, doesn't it? Chaotic, undefined, dangerous, and completely untrained. Wanda's eyes widened. How could you possibly? I have mastered energies that would drive lesser beings to madness. Your power is but a fraction of what flows through me. Untrained, unrefined, wasted. Enraged and frightened in equal measure, Wanda thrust her hands forward, unleashing a torrent of chaos magic. The scarlet energy struck a golden barrier that materialized around the Emperor, and for the first time, the two forces warred visibly, red and gold clashing in spectacular fashion. For the first time, the Emperor showed a flicker of strain. Vision seized the opportunity, the Mind Stone blazing as he fired a concentrated beam of pure cosmic energy. The combined assault forced the golden giant back, one single step. The Emperor's expression hardened. Enough! With a gesture that seemed to tear at reality's fabric, he released a fraction of his true power. Golden fire erupted from his form, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. Where it touched, transformation occurred. Grass became crystalline formations. Trees turned to golden glass. The very air solidified and shattered into prismatic fragments. When the display subsided, the Avengers found themselves completely immobilized, held in psychic stasis. Only Strange and Wanda retained any freedom of movement, their mystical protections barely sufficient. Your resistance is admirable, the Emperor acknowledged, not even breathing hard. But ultimately meaningless. I have battled beings that could devour stars. I have outwitted entities that existed before time itself had meaning. You cannot hope to defeat me. Yet even as he spoke, the Emperor felt something unexpected, a requirement to concentrate, an actual expenditure of effort. These heroes, disparate and undisciplined as they were, possessed powers that could collectively challenge him. Not threaten. But challenge interesting. This universe operates under different rules. The powers here are diverse, unpredictable. He recalculated his approach. I have not come as a conqueror, he stated, relaxing his hold slightly to allow them to breathe. I have come as a guide. I offer humanity a path to greatness it cannot achieve divided and leaderless. Captain America, still struggling against invisible bonds, managed to speak through gritted teeth. History is full of tyrants who claim to know what's best for humanity. They all failed. I am not a tyrant, the Emperor replied, and for a moment something like weariness crossed his ancient features. I am humanity's shepherd, its guardian against terrors your limited perspective cannot begin to comprehend. Then help us understand, came a new voice. A Quinjet touched down nearby, and Nick Fury emerged unarmed except for a small device in his hand. He walked toward the Emperor with the confidence of a man who'd stared down gods before. Because from where I'm standing, Fury continued, his single eye unwavering, you look an awful lot like the kind of threat S.H.I.E.L.D. was created to counter. The Emperor's gaze fell upon the one-eyed man, sensing a mind hardened by decades of impossible decisions. Your organization watches for threats to this world, maintains technology and information beyond what the general population is permitted to know. You understand, at least in principle, the necessity of guiding humanity from the shadows. Fury's expression remained unreadable. There's a difference between protection and control. We maintain the choice, the freedom that makes humanity worth protecting in the first place. Freedom, the Emperor repeated, a note of infinite weariness in his voice. You cling to that concept without understanding its cost. And then the Emperor showed them. The psychic projection hit every hero simultaneously. Not an attack, but a sharing of memory, of lived experience across 10 millennia. They saw Holy Terra during the Age of Strife, humanity's colonies scattered across the galaxy, cut off from each other, falling one by one to horrors from the warp. They saw worlds where chaos cults had risen, where entire populations had willingly slaughtered themselves in the name of the dark gods. They saw the orc hordes sweeping across human space, killing for the simple joy of violence. They saw the Emperor walking among the ruins of what had once been humanity's greatest civilizations, finding only bones and ash and the echoing laughter of chaos. They saw the unification wars, the brutal, necessary campaigns to unite Terra's fractured techno-barbarian kingdoms. They saw the terrible choices made, populations that refused to submit being wiped out, knowledge that could lead to chaos corruption being destroyed along with the innocent scholars who held it. They saw the Great Crusade, humanity spreading across the stars, reclaiming lost colonies, bringing the imperial truth to trillions. They saw the joy of worlds reunited with their species, and the horror of worlds that had to be purged because chaos had rooted too deeply. They saw the Horus heresy, the Emperor's most beloved son, turned against him, half the Space Marine legions falling to chaos, brother killing brother across 1,000 worlds. They saw the siege of Terra itself, saw the Emperor forced to kill his favorite son to save humanity's future. And they saw the Golden Throne, 10,000 years of the Emperor sitting immobile, his withered form kept alive by ancient technology, psychically shielding humanity from chaos while the Imperium slowly rotted from within. They saw the price of survival, 1 trillion souls living in ignorance and suffering, their brief lives spent in service to a doctrine they couldn't understand, all to maintain a barrier against the darkness. The vision ended. The heroes gasped, several falling to their knees. Wanda was weeping. So much death, so much suffering, all in your name. Yes, the Emperor said simply. That is the price of survival. What is the suffering of billions compared to the extinction of all? These are the calculations those who would lead must make. Tony Stark, usually quick with a quip, found his voice shaking. There has to be another way. There has to be. I have watched countless civilizations fall across 10,000 years, the Emperor replied. Those who sought another way perished first. Those who made the hard choices survived. Not all of them, Strange said quietly, having recovered from the vision. I saw it. In the end, even your Imperium is failing. For all your sacrifices, for all the suffering you've inflicted in the name of survival, humanity in your reality is slowly dying anyway. The Emperor's eyes flashed with something that might have been pain, perhaps, but it dies over millennia instead of months. Trillions have lived who would otherwise never have existed. Is that not worth the cost? No, Captain America said firmly, rising to his feet as the psychic bonds weakened. If that's the only choice, then maybe extinction would be better. At least we'd die free. For a long moment, the Emperor simply stared at him. Then unexpectedly, he laughed. A sound like thunder and grinding stone. Spoken like someone who has never watched everything they love turn to ash. But I admire your conviction, Captain. It is that spirit, that stubborn refusal to yield, that makes humanity worth saving in the first place. The Emperor turned, looking up at the sky. But your convictions will be tested soon enough. Even now, my presence here has drawn attention from forces you cannot imagine. What do you mean? Thor demanded. The barriers between dimensions are thinner in this reality than in mine. My arrival, my psychic presence, has created ripples across the multiverse. And there are things in the spaces between worlds that sense opportunity when such disturbances occur. Strange's expression shifted from defiance to alarm. His hands moved automatically, mystic senses extending outward. Oh no, oh God, no, what is it? Steve asked. He's right, Strange whispered, his face going pale. Something's coming. Multiple somethings. And they're hungry. The Emperor nodded gravely. The ruinous powers. The Great Devourer. The Necron Empire. Different names in different realities, but the threats remain constant. Predators that feed on divided, unprepared species. He released his psychic hold entirely. The heroes staggered but remained standing. Weapons still ready, but uncertainty now visible on their faces. I offer you a choice, the Emperor said. Accept my guidance. Allow me to prepare humanity for what comes, or continue your resistance and watch as this world falls to enemies you cannot possibly comprehend. You have 3 days to decide. With those words he began to rise, golden energy lifting him into the air. I will establish my fortress on your moon. From there, humanity's elevation shall begin. 3 days. Choose wisely. Thor whirled Mjolnir and launched himself skyward. I cannot allow you to threaten this world. The Emperor turned in midair, his hand extending toward the approaching Asgardian. A beam of pure golden psychic energy erupted from his palm, striking Thor with such force that even his godly constitution couldn't withstand it. The thunder god plummeted, creating a crater where he landed. He rose slowly, blood trickling from his mouth, Mjolnir trembling in his grip. He is stronger than anything I have faced, Thor admitted, his voice shaken, perhaps stronger than Odin himself. The Emperor continued his ascent until he was merely a point of golden light among the clouds. Then in a flash that briefly turned night into day, he was gone, streaking toward Earth's satellite at speeds that defied physics. In the stunned silence that followed, it was Spider-Man who finally spoke. So, did we just meet Space Jesus or Space Hitler? Because I'm genuinely confused. No one laughed, because no one knew the answer. On the lunar surface, the Emperor stood alone, gazing back at the blue marble that was Earth. So much potential, so much wasted on petty conflicts and divided purposes, just as it was in my reality, he thought, before I unified Terra, before the Great Crusade. With a thought and a gesture, he began to reshape the lunar regolith. The ground trembled as massive structures began to rise, towers of impossible architecture, walls that shimmered with golden energy, a fortress that would serve as the foundation for humanity's new empire. As he worked, the Emperor considered the beings he'd encountered, more powerful than he'd initially calculated, the sorcerer with his reality-bending powers, the artificial being with the Infinity Stone embedded in its forehead, the woman whose chaotic abilities had actually managed to touch his mind. They would resist. Of course they would. In time they will understand. Or they will perish. The outcome was inevitable either way. The emergency meeting at the Avengers compound lasted 7 hours. Every available hero had been summoned. The Avengers, the Defenders, the X-Men, representatives from Wakanda, Asgard, and even a skeptical Carol Danvers who'd returned from deep space the moment she felt the psychic disturbance. Let's start with what we know, Fury began, standing at the head of the conference table. This Emperor appears to be human, or at least humanoid, but possesses power on a scale we've rarely encountered. His energy signature doesn't match anything in the mystic records, Strange added, still pale from his earlier confrontation. It's not magic as we understand it, though it operates on similar principles. He calls it psychic power, but it's far beyond any documented telepathy. My scans detected massive reality distortion around him, Tony interjected, holographic displays flickering to life, almost like he was imposing his own laws of physics on our universe. The energy output was off the scale. Thor, his usual confidence subdued, spoke next. In Asgard, there are legends of beings called Celestials, entities of such power they could create or destroy worlds at will. His might reminded me of those tales. But he claimed to be human, Steve pointed out. From another reality, but human nonetheless. Wanda, still shaken from her psychic contact, shook her head. Not just human. Humanity's future as he sees it. I glimpsed fragments of his mind. He truly believes he's the pinnacle of human evolution, the only hope for mankind's survival. Vision placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. And he is convinced his way, unity through absolute control, is the only path forward. Which brings us to the threats he warned about, Fury continued. Strange you saw something when you used the time stone. Care to elaborate? Strange hesitated, his hands trembling slightly. It was difficult to comprehend. I saw entities that exist partly in our dimension, partly outside it. Vast swarms that consume all life. Machine empires older than Earth itself. And 4 presences. Vast intelligences that feed on emotion, worship, suffering. So he wasn't lying about the threats, Bruce Banner noted quietly. Not necessarily, Strange conceded. But that doesn't justify his methods. Replacing one form of tyranny with another isn't salvation. T'Challa, king of Wakanda, leaned forward. The question remains, how do we respond? 3 days before he proceeds with his plans, as he put it, We fight, Steve said firmly. We've faced wannabe conquerors before, have we? Tony challenged. This isn't Loki with an alien army or Ultron with his robot legions. This is a being who stopped Thor with a gesture, who shrugged off a direct hit from the Mind Stone, who unraveled one of Strange's spells like it was a party trick. Stark is right, Thor admitted grimly. Our usual tactics will not prevail against such power. The debate continued, strategies proposed and dismissed, alliances considered and questioned. Throughout it all, a sense of inevitability hung in the air. As the sun rose on the second day, satellite imagery confirmed what they'd suspected. A massive structure now dominated the lunar surface, a fortress of gleaming gold and impossible architecture, visible to the naked eye from Earth. Within hours, telescopes around the world were trained on it. Social media exploded with speculation. Governments issued contradictory statements ranging from calls for calm to declarations of emergency. And in his lunar stronghold, the Emperor watched it all unfold, his ancient mind calculating the probability of acceptance versus resistance. Tony Stark was in his lab, surrounded by holographic displays, when he felt the presence enter his mind, not violently, but like a door opening, inviting him to step through. Stark, your intellect is wasted on trinkets and personal glory. I offer you knowledge beyond imagination, technology that would make your most advanced creations seem like stone tools. Join me. Help forge humanity's future among the stars. The vision that accompanied the words was breathtaking. Workshops spanning continents, Stark towers on 1,000 worlds, technologies that could cure any disease and any scarcity, elevate humanity to heights undreamed of. All it would cost was his independence. Across the world, others received similar offers. T'Challa was shown visions of Wakanda expanded to encompass continents, its technology the foundation for a new human empire spanning the galaxy. Bruce Banner was promised complete control over the Hulk, an end to the constant struggle between man and monster, the ability to harness that power at will. Wanda Maximoff was offered mastery over her chaotic powers, understanding that would transform her from a dangerous wildcard into a weapon of precisely controlled cosmic force. Even Steve Rogers received a vision, a world united and at peace. Humanity spreading throughout the galaxy without warfare, without the endless conflicts that had defined its history. Each offer was tailored with terrifying precision to the individual's deepest desires and greatest fears. Consider, carefully, the Emperor's voice echoed in each mind. What I offer is not domination but transcendence, not subjugation but salvation. The path is difficult, yes. Sacrifices must be made, but the alternative is extinction. The psychic projections ended as suddenly as they'd begun, leaving each recipient shaken and uncertain. At the Sanctum Sanctorum, Dr. Strange sat cross-legged in the meditation chamber. The eye of Agamotto opened before him as he searched through millions of possible futures. In nearly every one, he saw the same outcome, the Emperor's vision fulfilled, humanity united under his banner, spreading throughout the cosmos. Yet in each scenario, something vital was lost, the spark that made humanity unique, the chaotic potential that drove innovation and adaptation, the very freedom the Emperor claimed to be sacrificing for survival. And beneath those futures, Strange glimpsed something else, entities stirring in the void between dimensions, drawn by the Emperor's overwhelming psychic presence. The threats he'd warned of were real. But his very existence in this reality was accelerating their approach. Strange's eyes snapped open. Wong, prepare the mirror dimension chamber and contact everyone. We have less time than we thought. The vessel of Asgardian design approached the lunar fortress cautiously, carrying Thor, Tony Stark in his space-capable armor, and Dr. Strange maintaining an air bubble with mystical energy. As they neared, the massive golden gateway rippled and solidified, opening into a vast hall that somehow contained breathable air and Earth-normal gravity. Impossible by conventional physics, but the Emperor had never been bound by convention. He sat upon a throne at the far end, not an ostentatious display, but a simple seat that nonetheless commanded absolute authority. You are earlier than expected, he said. Have you come to accept my offer or to make futile objections? Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir held respectfully. We come to speak plainly, Emperor. You claim to protect humanity, Yet you would strip them of what makes them human. And what would that be, Prince of Asgard? Choice, Strange replied before Thor could speak. The right to determine their own destiny, even if that destiny leads to failure. The Emperor's expression remained impassive.
Choice is a luxury afforded to species not hunted across the cosmos.
In my reality, humanity learned this through near extinction. Would you have your people learn the same lesson? We've faced extinction-level threats before, Tony countered, his helmet retracting. We're still here, not because someone imposed their will from above, but because we chose to stand together when it mattered. Admirable sentiment, the Emperor acknowledged, but ultimately naive. The threats you have faced are insignificant compared to what approaches. Strange raised his hands, orange sigils forming. About that, I've been looking ahead using the time stone, and I've noticed something interesting. The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, the first hint of concern. The stones of this reality are powerful but limited in scope. Maybe, Strange agreed. But they showed me enough to know that your presence here isn't just warning us of threats. It's accelerating their arrival. Your psychic footprint spans dimensions, leaving a trail for them to follow. For the first time, the Emperor hesitated. An unforeseen complication. The dimensional barriers here are more permeable than in my reality. In other words, Tony translated, your arrival punched a hole in cosmic fabric, and now the big bads you warned us about are using it like a highway. All the more reason to prepare, to unify your world's defenses under my guidance. Or, Strange countered, all the more reason for you to return to your own reality before the damage becomes irreparable. The Emperor rose from his throne, towering over them. I cannot return. The passage was one way, a desperate measure when my universe faced collapse. I am here now, and I will not stand idle while humanity faces annihilation. Thor stepped closer. There is another possibility, Emperor, one we come to propose in good faith. Speak then. Work with us, not above us, Thor said. Share your knowledge, your power, but allow humanity to maintain its sovereignty. Be an ally, not a ruler. The Emperor's laugh was unexpected, bitter, ancient, carrying the weight of millennia. I tried that approach once in the early days of Old Terra. I guided from shadows, inspired great leaders, planted seeds of knowledge when humanity was ready. Do you know what happened? He didn't wait for an answer. They fell to fighting among themselves. Nation against nation, ideology against ideology. Technology meant to elevate was weaponized. The age of strife nearly ended humanity before external threats could reach them. With respect, Strange interjected, this isn't your Earth. Our history is different. Our potential. Your history follows the same patterns, the Emperor cut him off. Different names, different dates, but the same fundamental flaws. Humanity divided against itself while greater predators circle. As they debated, something changed in the chamber's atmosphere, a subtle shift that only those with enhanced senses detected. The Emperor's head snapped up, focusing on something beyond physical reality. They come. Sooner than I calculated. The dimensional barriers are failing. Strange felt it a moment later, mystic alarms triggering in his consciousness. Something's breaking through, not just in one place. Everywhere. The Emperor moved with shocking speed, striding past the three heroes toward the fortress entrance. Witness what I sought to protect you from. Outside, the stark beauty of the lunar landscape had changed. The black sky rippled with colors that had no names in human language. The stars seemed to blink in patterns suggesting malevolent intelligence. And in the distance, where Earth hung in space, shadows moved across its surface, shadows cast by nothing physical. The veil thins, the Emperor explained grimly. The entities I warned of begin to press against reality, sensing weakness, sensing opportunity. Strange's hands moved in complex patterns, golden energy spreading outward. This is happening too fast. The calculation suggested we had more time. Your calculations failed to account for variables beyond your comprehension. Now we must act decisively or watch as your reality unravels. The Emperor raised his hands, golden light erupting to join Strange's efforts. The combined energy spread across the visible sky like a net, temporarily stabilizing the dimensional boundaries. But even as they worked, new ruptures formed faster than they could be sealed. It is as I feared. The incursion has progressed too far for conventional countermeasures. More direct intervention is required. Without warning, the Emperor placed his hand on Strange's shoulder. The sorcerer gasped as unimaginable power flowed into him, the eye of Agamotto flaring with emerald light as it channeled energies it was never designed to contain. "What are you doing?" Strange demanded through gritted teeth. "Providing you with the means to temporarily strengthen this reality's barriers. Your artifact combined with my power creates a resonance that repels the entities attempting entry, but it is not permanent." Thor and Tony watched as the sky stabilized, unnatural colors receding, stars returning to normal positions. But Strange's face was contorted with effort, blood trickling from his nose. "I cannot hold this indefinitely," he gasped. "Nor should you have to," the Emperor replied, removing his hand. Strange staggered but remained standing. What you witnessed was merely the first wave, harbingers of what approaches. The true threat remains beyond the veil, gathering strength. "Then we must prepare," Thor said. "Asgard will stand with Midgard, noble but insufficient. Your Asgard is powerful by this universe's standards but pales compared to what comes. Only humanity, united and elevated beyond its current limitations, stands a chance." Tony had been uncharacteristically silent, his genius mind processing variables. Finally, "What if there's a third option? Not your way or our way, but something new." The Emperor regarded him with mild interest. "Explain." "You say you can't go back to your reality, fine. But what if we could send these entities back where they came from? Close the breach from this side." "Impossible with your current technology." "Our current technology, sure," Tony agreed. "But what about yours combined with the Infinity Stones? Combined with Asgardian science, combined with Strange's magic, combined with every resource we can muster?" For the first time, the Emperor seemed to truly consider an alternative. Such an effort would require perfect coordination, resources beyond what your fractured nations would willingly provide. "Then earn their trust," Thor suggested. "Demonstrate your value as an ally rather than imposing your will as a conqueror." The Emperor stood silent, weighing possibilities against probabilities, ideals against pragmatism. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision. "I will consider your proposal, but not from weakness. I will continue construction of this fortress. I will continue preparations. And when the full incursion begins, we shall see whose approach proves more effective." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't outright rejection either. "Now leave. Return to your Earth. Make what preparations you deem necessary. We will speak again when circumstances demand it." As they turned to depart, the Emperor added, "Know this. I have witnessed the fall of countless civilizations across 10 millennia. I have seen species with greater potential than humanity reduced to extinction because they clung to comfortable ideals. I will not allow that fate here. One way or another, humanity will survive, even if I must break it to save it." The return journey was silent, each lost in thought about what they'd witnessed. Upon arrival at the new Avengers facility, every defender of Earth convened, physically or via secure communication. The mood was grim as Strange, Thor, and Tony recounted their meeting. "So we're caught between a rock and a hard place," Sam Wilson summarized. "Accept this Emperor's guidance or face extra-dimensional horrors that make Thanos look tame." "Those aren't our only options," Steve insisted. "If these threats are real, we face them together. On our terms." "Not like this," Strange countered. "What I glimpsed, entities that feed on emotion itself. Swarms that devour not just life but reality. Machine empires that view organic existence as an error to be corrected." Wanda, who'd been quiet, suddenly spoke. "I saw them too, when I touched his mind. He calls them the ruinous powers, gods formed from the collective darkness of sentient minds. But I also saw a contradiction. He claims to fight for humanity's survival, yet his methods strip away everything that makes humanity worth saving." "Better than extinction," Natasha noted pragmatically. "Is it?" Steve challenged. "What's the point of survival if we lose our souls?" The debate was interrupted by alarms, screens showing news feeds from around the world. Strange disturbances globally, shadows moving against light, voices in empty rooms, technology malfunctioning with apparent intelligence. Aurora-like lights visible even in daylight, rippling with colors that caused physical discomfort to viewers. "It's starting," Strange said, "faster than anticipated. The dimensional barriers continue to weaken." "Can you stop it?" Fury demanded. Strange shook his head. "Not alone. Not permanently. What the Emperor and I did was temporary. It required his power combined with the time stone. Then we need him, Bruce stated. Whether we like it or not. At what cost? Steve argued. If we surrender our autonomy now, we'll never get it back. Tony, standing apart, his mind racing through possibilities, finally rejoined the group. I might have a solution. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but a third option. He activated holographic displays, schematics combining Earth technology, Asgardian science, and theoretical models based on the Emperor's capabilities. We build our own dimensional barrier, Tony explained. A shield not just around Earth, but around our entire reality, using the Infinity Stones as power sources, amplified by technology derived from studying the Emperor's fortress. That's ambitious, Bruce commented, studying the schematics. Borderline impossible. With our current technology, yes, Tony agreed. But we're not limited to that. Thor brings Asgardian scientists. T'Challa contributes Wakandan resources. Strange has the mystic community. And the Emperor, what about him? Fury asked. Tony's expression hardened with determination. We offer him a choice. Help us as an ally, sharing knowledge while respecting our autonomy, or watch as we potentially destroy ourselves attempting to solve this our way. He says he values humanity's survival. Let's see if he means it. He will not respond well to ultimatums, Thor warned. It's not an ultimatum, Tony countered. It's an opportunity for him to prove his intentions. The plan was far from perfect. Technological hurdles were daunting, coordination between nations unprecedented, but it maintained humanity's agency, rejecting both unconditional surrender and passive acceptance of doom. Work began immediately. The Avengers facility became the hub of the most ambitious collaboration in Earth's history. Scientists from around the world worked alongside sorcerers from Kamar Taj. Wakandan engineers shared centuries-guarded technology. Asgardian specialists arrived bringing knowledge that blended science and magic. At the center stood Tony Stark, coordinating efforts spanning disciplines most didn't know existed. Bruce Banner worked at his side, his gamma radiation expertise proving essential. Jane Foster provided crucial insights into Einstein-Rosen-bridge technology. Stephen Strange supervised mystical elements, ensuring science didn't inadvertently weaken what they sought to strengthen. Days passed. The phenomena intensified. People reported nightmares so vivid they feared sleep. Animals behaved erratically, sensing invisible threats. Skies darkened with clouds moving against wind, forming patterns like faces before dissolving. And on the moon, the Emperor watched. His fortress had grown, expanding across the lunar surface, golden spires reaching toward Earth like accusing fingers. Occasional energy pulses emanated from it, temporarily stabilizing the worst breaches. He was keeping his word, preventing immediate catastrophe, but doing nothing to address the underlying problem. On the fifth day, as the global situation deteriorated, a delegation was dispatched. Steve Rogers, Tony Stark, Stephen Strange, Earth strategist, inventor, and mystic defender, united in purpose. They were admitted without delay to the Emperor's throne room. You returned sooner than expected, he noted. Has your resolve faltered? We're not here to surrender, Steve said firmly. We're here to offer partnership. Explain. Tony activated a portable holographic projector displaying their dimensional barrier project. We're building this, a shield to repair dimensional breaches and prevent further incursions, but we need your knowledge to complete it. The Emperor studied the display and something like respect crossed his features. Ambitious. The theoretical framework is sound, though implementation remains crude. You lack fundamental understanding. That's why we're here, Strange said, to propose an exchange. Your knowledge for our independence. Help us complete this barrier. Teach us what we need to defend ourselves and we'll withdraw opposition to your presence. A compromise. The Emperor seemed amused. Rare to be offered rather than forced. He approached the display. Your design has merit but critical flaws. Power requirements alone would exceed anything your civilization could generate. That's where the Infinity Stones come in, Tony explained. 6 fundamental forces of our universe harnessed together. The Emperor's interest intensified visibly. Show me these stones. Strange opened the eye of Agamotto, revealing the time stone's pulsing green light. This is one. The others are scattered, protected. Together they grant power over fundamental aspects of existence. Time, space, reality, mind, soul, power. The Emperor studied it with newfound respect. In my reality, such artifacts were mere legends. Perhaps here they are real. Fascinating. He turned back to the schematics. With these stones as power sources, your barrier becomes theoretically viable. But engineering challenges remain immense. Coordination requirements exceed your current capabilities. That's where you come in, Steve said. Your knowledge, your experience. Not as our ruler, as our ally. Long silence. Then unexpectedly the Emperor laughed. Genuine amusement tinged with ancient weariness. In all my millennia, humanity's stubbornness never ceases to amaze. Even facing extinction, you cling to independence with admirable tenacity. He gestured, and the holographic display expanded, sections rewriting themselves as his vast knowledge interfaced with the technology. Your design requires these modifications. Power distribution must follow this pattern to prevent cascade failures. Dimensional anchors must be placed at precisely these coordinates for maximum stability. The three heroes exchanged glances of cautious optimism. The Emperor continued working, his massive hands moving through the holographic interface with surprising delicacy. Understand, what you propose is unprecedented. Even in my reality, such a barrier would be considered impossible. You attempt what gods would hesitate to undertake. We've beaten the odds before, Steve said simply. The Emperor paused, studying him. Yes, this reality's humanity possesses remarkable capacity for defying probability. Perhaps. He hesitated, as if the thought was difficult. Perhaps that is why I was drawn here, not by random chance but by deeper resonance, recognition that here, humanity's potential follows a different path than in my reality. It was the first suggestion he might be reconsidering his assumptions. I will assist with your barrier. I will provide the knowledge required. But know this, if your approach fails, if the incursion cannot be halted by your methods, I will implement mine. Humanity's survival remains non-negotiable, even if the form of that survival displeases you. It wasn't unconditional support, but it was more than they'd dared hope for. The bargain was struck. Work accelerated with the Emperor's input. Insurmountable technical challenges were resolved through principles humanity hadn't yet discovered. Collection of the Infinity Stones became highest priority. The Time Stone remained with Dr. Strange. The Mind Stone resided in Vision's forehead. Its extraction would kill him, requiring development of a procedure to safely separate them. The Space Stone, once contained within the Tesseract, was retrieved from a secret shield facility. The Reality Stone, known as the Ether, required negotiation with Asgard, who'd secured it after the convergence. The Power Stone was recovered from Novacore custody on Xandar, requiring a diplomatic mission led by Thor. And the Soul Stone, most enigmatic of all, remained hidden until Wong discovered ancient texts pointing to its location on Vormir. As stones were gathered, dimensional incursions intensified. Cities worldwide reported impossible phenomena. Moscow, shadows moved independent of their casters. Tokyo, electronic systems generated messages in languages that had never existed. Cairo, the sky turned blood red at noon for exactly 17 minutes. Panic spread despite governmental efforts to maintain calm. Religious leaders proclaimed end times. Scientists struggled to explain events violating natural laws. Through it all, the Emperor's lunar fortress remained visible, a constant reminder of the choice facing humanity. The barrier's final component was constructed in orbit, a massive array of satellites and space stations linked by technology blending, Stark innovation, Wakandan vibranium applications, and Asgardian energy systems. At strategic global locations, ground facilities housed equipment to channel and control the stone's power. On activation day, representatives from every nation gathered at Avengers Compound. The mood was tense, expectant. Success meant facing extra-dimensional threats on their own terms. Failure likely meant accepting the Emperor's vision, if there was even time. The 6 Infinity Stones were placed in specially designed receptacles at 6 facilities worldwide, each surrounded by maximum protection. Teams of scientists, engineers, and mystics stood ready at each location. In orbit, Tony supervised space-based components, his most advanced armor interfacing directly with the system. Below, Bruce coordinated ground facilities, his gamma radiation expertise essential for managing tremendous energies. Stephen Strange, with Kamartaj's collected mystics, worked to ensure the barrier would affect the right dimensions, sealing breaches without cutting Earth off from benign cosmic forces. The Emperor watched from his lunar fortress, psychic senses extended to observe every operation aspect. He'd fulfilled his bargain, providing needed knowledge. Now he'd witness whether humanity could implement it. As activation approached, Strange contacted the Emperor through mystic communication. "There's something you should know. The barrier will seal all dimensional breaches, including the one that brought you here. Once activated, no further interreality travel will be possible. I am aware. It is necessary for complete dimensional integrity. It also means you'll be permanently stranded, unable to return even if a method were discovered. There is nothing to return to, sorcerer. My reality faces its own ending. That is why I came, to ensure at least one version of humanity survives the coming darkness." The countdown began. Around the world, infinity stones pulsed with increasing intensity, energies channeled through systems designed to harmonize and amplify their fundamental properties. In orbit, the satellite array hummed with power, preparing to extend the barrier not just around Earth, but the entire solar system. At T-10 seconds, alarms blared across all stations. Dimensional breaches were expanding exponentially, as if forces beyond had sensed impending closure and were making a desperate final push. Skies above every continent tore open, revealing glimpses of realms that drove observers to madness. Creatures of nightmare began materializing, demons of pure emotion, swarms of chitinous horrors, machines moving with terrible purpose. The incursion had begun in earnest. "Now or never," Tony's voice came through communications, initiating final sequence. The infinity stones flared simultaneously, energies shooting skyward in 6 brilliant columns of light. The satellite array captured and redistributed power, forming an energy web that quickly expanded to encompass the planet. As it touched dimensional tiers, they began closing, reality knitting itself back together under the stone's fundamental power. But it wasn't enough. Incursions were too numerous, too powerful. The barrier formed, then fluctuated, struggling to maintain integrity against entities desperate to break through. "We're losing coherence in sectors 3 and 5, Bruce reported, voice strained, power distribution becoming unstable. "The dimensional anchors aren't holding," Strange added. "Something is actively counteracting our efforts, something with intelligence and purpose." In orbit, Tony watched portions of the barrier flicker and fail, allowing glimpses of the horror awaiting beyond. "We need more power," he muttered. "The stones alone aren't enough." On the moon, the Emperor observed the failing barrier with disappointment and grim vindication. He'd expected as much, though he'd allowed himself small hope they might succeed on their own terms. Now only one option remained. Without warning, his fortress blazed with golden light, energy pouring from its spires in a concentrated beam toward Earth. But rather than striking the planet, the energy interfaced with the barrier, reinforcing it, stabilizing fluctuating sections. The Emperor, Strange sensed immediately, he's channeling his power into the barrier. On screens worldwide, the lunar fortress was visible as the brightest object in the sky, a golden star pouring energy toward Earth in continuous stream. The barrier strengthened, coherence improving as the Emperor's power merged with the stones. But even this combined might struggled. Dimensional tiers slowed their closure but didn't stop completely. Something vast and malevolent continued pushing against reality itself, seeking entrance. In his fortress, the Emperor recognized what was happening. The entities he'd warned of, the ruinous powers, the Great Devourer, the Necron Empire, had sensed a new reality ripe for conquest. They would not be denied easily. There was only one solution, one final sacrifice to secure humanity's future. Without hesitation, the Emperor redirected his psychic power, not merely supporting the barrier, but actively interfacing with it. His consciousness expanded, merging with the energy field, becoming one with the dimensional shield's very fabric. On Earth, effects were immediately apparent. The barrier stabilized completely, tiers in reality closing one by one. Nightmare entities that had begun materializing were forced back. howling in rage as their access was denied, but the cost was visible to all. The Emperor's fortress began dissolving, its impossible architecture breaking down as power maintaining it was redirected. The Golden Giant himself was no longer visible within. His physical form apparently surrendered to become part of the shield. In the command center, Strange staggered as his mystic senses detected what was happening. He's becoming the barrier, using himself as the final component, the keystone holding it all together. Is that even possible? Steve asked, shock evident. For a being of his nature, yes, Strange replied. He exists partially outside conventional reality already. His psychic power transcends physical limitations. He's essentially transforming into a living dimensional wall. Tony's voice came through, filled with disbelief. The barrier is stabilizing across all sectors, dimensional integrity restoring to normal parameters. Whatever he's doing, it's working. Across Earth, skies cleared. Unnatural phenomena ceased. Reality reasserted itself as the barrier completed formation, sealing the solar system within a protective shell that prevented extra-dimensional incursion, while allowing normal cosmic forces to function. The immediate crisis had passed. Humanity was safe. But the cost had been the Emperor himself. His consciousness apparently sacrificed to become the barrier's living heart. In the days following, scientists and mystics studied the barrier, attempting to understand its nature. What they discovered was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The Emperor had not been destroyed. Rather, his consciousness had spread throughout the barrier, becoming its guiding intelligence. He existed now as an omnipresent guardian, aware of every attempt to breach dimensional integrity, actively maintaining the shield protecting humanity from horrors beyond. In effect, he'd become exactly what he'd claimed to be, humanity's protector and shepherd. But rather than ruling through direct intervention, he now maintained a silent vigil, preserving the very freedom he'd once sought to restrict. The final revelation came a week after activation, as the Avengers gathered to discuss implications. A psychic message reached them all simultaneously, the Emperor's voice, recognizable yet transformed. I have found my purpose in this reality, not as humanity's ruler but as its guardian. The barrier requires constant maintenance, constant vigilance against forces that would break through. This task I accept freely. Can you return to physical form? Strange asked aloud. Not without compromising the barrier's integrity. This is not temporary but permanent vigil. The forces seeking entrance do not tire, do not relent. Neither shall I. So you've trapped yourself, Tony observed. Become a living shield instead of a living god. Ironic. An ironic outcome, the Emperor acknowledged. In my reality, I sat upon the golden throne, physically immobile yet psychically active, guiding humanity from afar. Here I have no throne, no physical form at all. Yet my purpose remains fundamentally the same. There was something in his tone, not quite regret but newfound perspective. A being who'd lived for millennia, who'd guided civilizations, who'd seen humanity at its best and worst, had found new understanding of his purpose. I have existed long enough to know that change is the only constant, even for one such as I. My methods were forged in a reality where compromise meant extinction. Perhaps here, where humanity has demonstrated remarkable resilience, a different approach is not merely possible but necessary. Does this mean you approve of our stubborn independence after all? Steve asked with hint of satisfaction. Approve would overstate it, Captain Rogers. Let us say I have revised my assessment. Your reality's humanity possesses qualities mine had lost long before my emergence. Capacity for unity without uniformity, for cooperation without submission. These are strengths I had forgotten could exist. And the threats you warned about? Thor questioned. They remain beyond the barrier, circling like predators testing for weakness. They will never cease their attempts. But neither will I cease my vigilance. This is the purpose I have chosen, the duty I have assumed. The implications were profound. The Emperor of mankind, a being who'd sought to rule humanity for its protection, had instead become its silent guardian, not imposing will from a golden throne, but maintaining a shield of energy and consciousness that preserved humanity's freedom to choose its own path. In the months that followed, life on Earth gradually returned to normal, or as normal as it could be. Knowing a godlike being had become the living barrier protecting reality itself. The Infinity Stones were returned to their various guardians, no longer needed to maintain the dimensional shield now that the Emperor's consciousness served as its foundation. Scientists studied the barrier, finding it impenetrable to conventional analysis. Mystics sensed its presence as constant reassurance, a wall between reality and the horrors lurking beyond. And ordinary people, for the most part, continued their lives unaware of how close their world had come to extinction. Occasionally, in moments of crisis or cosmic significance, those with enhanced perception would feel the Emperor's attention shift, his vast consciousness focusing briefly on events of particular importance. Not interfering, merely observing as humanity made its choices, faced its challenges, continued its journey toward whatever destiny awaited. 1 year to the day after the barrier's creation, Dr. Strange stood alone on the Sanctum Sanctorum's roof, gazing at the night sky. To normal eyes, nothing appeared different. Stars shone as always. The moon hung in its accustomed place. But to Strange's mystic senses, the Emperor's presence was visible as a subtle golden aura, encompassing the entire solar system. "Are we worth it?" Strange asked softly. "The sacrifice you've made, the eternal vigil you now maintain. Is humanity truly worth such a price?" The response came not as words, but as impressions, feelings, fragments of thought Strange's mind struggled to interpret. Pride in what humanity had achieved, hope for what it might become, determination to ensure it had the chance to reach its potential. And beneath it all, a certainty that had survived millennia of war, betrayal, and disappointment, a fundamental belief in humanity's worth that transcended reason or logic. Strange smiled faintly. "I suppose that answers that." He turned to go inside, then paused as one final impression reached him. "I have found my purpose, not as humanity's master, but as its shield. This is not sacrifice, but fulfillment." And so the Emperor of mankind, who had come to a new reality, seeking to impose his vision of unity through strength, instead found a different path. Not a throne from which to command, but a barrier through which to protect. Not subjects to rule, but a species to guard. Not the master of mankind, but its most dedicated defender. The stars continued their eternal dance. The planets spun in their orbits, and around it all, unseen but ever present, the Emperor maintained his vigil, watching, waiting, protecting. Not for glory or worship or power, but for the simplest and most profound of reasons. Because humanity, with all its flaws and follies, all its contradictions and complexities, was worth protecting. In the vastness of the cosmos, as countless threats circled the dimensional barrier seeking entry, they found not the fractured, vulnerable world they'd anticipated, but a shield of golden light that rebuffed their every attempt at incursion, a shield maintained by a consciousness that had once sought to conquer what it now chose to defend. A being who had found, at last, the true meaning of his existence, not in dominion, but in sacrifice. The Emperor of mankind had indeed come to the Marvel Universe, and in doing so, he had not conquered it, he had become its guardian.